Money Arata. Over 10 years ago, an encrypted digital currency was invented, Bitcoin. This currency is unlike anything you have ever heard of. It is controlled by cryptography. It is not issued by the government. It does not have a central bank or a regulatory body. The true identity of its creator or group of creators is not known either. They go by the name of Satoshi Nakamoto. Despite all these abnormal aspects, Bitcoin is becoming more and more popular. You have probably heard of it. Perhaps you were impressed by the way its price has continually increased ever since its creation. Perhaps you have even considered investing in it. But at the same time, you are probably put off when the value of Bitcoin falls drastically, or when you read an article that seems to be announcing the death of Bitcoin. And why is it that even today so many people have not found the courage to invest in Bitcoin? The complexity of the process and understanding how Bitcoin, how cryptocurrency works, can be intimidating. Not only this, but the volatility of its nature is also unsettling. 1 minute, it seems extremely expensive, and in the next, it is falling. So let's put an end to this difficulty. By the end of this, you will clearly understand how Bitcoin works and why people attach value to a currency that is literally just computer code created by individuals without any government interference. This computer code is so revolutionary that it could mark the end of money as we know it. This is not financial advice. Please read the full disclaimer before proceeding. To properly understand the value of Bitcoin or any other asset, you need to look at more than just the price. The first step to truly understanding the value of cryptocurrency is to stop looking just at its price. I know this seems counterintuitive. However, it is going to help you to truly understand how prices are formed. Have you ever wondered how money came to be? In the beginning, when people needed a product or a service, they exchanged things. You wanted meat, and you had a lot of flour at home. Luckily, your neighbor needed flour, they had some spare cows, so you agreed to exchange a cow for a few bags of flour, and everything was fine. Now you can imagine the issues that this barter system caused. Sometimes you had flour, but you wanted butter. But your other neighbor who had butter actually wanted meat. So you needed to exchange the flour for meat and then the meat for butter. It was just confusing. Because of this, people began using goods as a means of exchange. These goods helped facilitate exchanges. Some communities chose salt, some tobacco, some chose seashells, but over time nearly every community evolved to use precious metals as a medium of exchange. Metal has the advantage of being durable enough to be preserved without losing value, since it is able to last a long period of time without spoiling, without rotting. Metal can also be divided into any number of parts, as the fragments lost in division can be recovered by fusion. Because of this, the metal itself was valuable, so it was perfect as a standard for money. The gold standard represents the direct relationship between paper money and true wealth. Gold and silver became the main metals to serve as means of exchange. The coins had value in themselves because they were made from precious metals. So even if someone did not accept that particular coin you had, they could always melt it and use the gold or silver. However, notice a small detail. The value of the metal's weight was not always equal to the face value of the coin. In fact, what gave the coin the face value was the trust in the person that was giving that coin to you. Proof of this is the fact that a worn silver coin had the same value as a newly minted coin, which had slightly more precious metal. And this is why money issued by the government is known as fiduciary money. Fiduciary is a word associated with faith, meaning the confidence that something expresses. After precious metal coins, paper notes representing different values were invented. And then came the question of how to assign values to the notes. And after a lot of studying, John Locke's thesis, which said that money was the related precious metal itself, that was the one accepted. That is, for each paper money banknote, there should be a reserve in precious metal, which became known as the gold standard. Before the gold standard, value came from trust in the authority that emitted that money. In other words, there was nothing to stop anyone from printing large amounts of money. of paper money. Since the ancient Chinese era over 700 years ago, the effects of inflation were already known when the government began to print a lot of money. The gold standard was essentially a limit to that power of the government. In order to print more money, the government needed to acquire more gold reserves. That is why it was said that these notes were backed by gold. A banknote worth 100 represented the same amount of gold, that 100 of gold, stored in a bank of the country that issued that note. The gold standard is no longer used, meaning that now paper can be freely printed. And this makes people poorer. For a long time, the gold standard was a limit which worked well in preventing governments from causing massive inflation. However, after the two world wars, combined with the 1929 economic crisis, the idea of a welfare state arose. In order to provide so many benefits to the population, governments needed more money. Now, how does a government earn money? One way is increasing taxes, but that is a highly unpopular method. The other option was to simply print more money, ignoring this stabilization theory. So this idea of gold-backed currency became less and less popular until 1971, when the United States government officially abandoned the gold standard. Other countries began to follow suit, and nowadays practically every single currency does not have any backing at all. It is printed according to each country's will. Now, why am I telling you all of this? What is the context that we have laid out here to aid your understanding of an essential aspect of the end of money as we know it? It is the following. One of the main features of Bitcoin is that it is limited. It is mathematically programmed. No matter what happens, the Bitcoin program only allows to issue less than 21 million units of that currency. And this is not done by any governing body or any central entity. New Bitcoin units are issued through a process called mining, which helps to control the network. It is estimated by the year 2140, all the limit of these 21 million Bitcoin units will be issued already, and then from then, the currency will simply be exchanged between people. And this was all done on purpose. The idea is that there is no governing body issuing the currency and therefore devaluing it. The scarcity of Bitcoin aims to digitally simulate the scarcity of precious metals, meaning that the currency's value is guaranteed through a backing. When a good is limited, like Bitcoin, the price is determined based on the law of supply and demand. The more people are seeking available Bitcoin units, the more the price increases. Therefore, the price is in line with the value that society gives to it, without any artificial intervention by governments or regulatory bodies. The technology behind Bitcoin could represent the end of money as we know it. Many people say that Bitcoin will affect money in the same way that email affected letters, or that streaming affected CDs. And even though many people still see Bitcoin as something of the future, the truth is that the future is already here. It is just not evenly distributed. It is perhaps why maybe you are still living in the past, while a lot of people are already operating, investing, and using Bitcoin as a scarce, portable, digital, international currency, independent from governments and with a value determined by the market. Even if you are more conservative and if you prefer dealing with physical banknotes, just know that the majority of your money is already digital. The number that you see in your bank statement is no more than computer code. There is no real gold or paper notes stored in the vault of the bank representing what you see there in your computer screen. If everyone in the world decided to go to the bank at the same time today and withdraw their funds, there would just not be enough money for everyone. When you use your credit card to purchase something, you are already using digital currency. And when you use your paper banknote, in a certain way, you're still using digital money because at the end of the day, that physical note or coin is just a way of representing the digital money that is controlled by the banking system. So in that case, since all the money in the world is already digital, what is the big difference between fiat currencies and Bitcoin? Bitcoin is decentralized. This is the big difference. Decentralized money is powerful. and it prevents the authorities from deciding what to do with your future. The big difference here between traditional currencies and Bitcoin is that traditional currencies are controlled by a centralized government. Bitcoin is not. There is no governing body controlling the Bitcoin network. Bitcoin does not have a head office, a CEO, a managing director who decides what to do. Bitcoin functions in a peer-to-peer network. On the other hand, when it comes to traditional currencies, the network, the relationship is unequal. The relationship is similar to that of a master and a slave. In this case, the government is the master and you are the slave because you have no control or power. If you had a banknote worth 100 and the government suddenly decided to issue a lot of more money without backing, that 100 bucks that you have is worth less. The more money in circulation, the less scarce the money is and the less value it has. Once the government has this power to freely issue money, they manipulate the law of supply and demand how they like, which according to some theories can lead to inflation and devaluation of physical money. In other words, more simple, direct words, you become poorer. Your interactions with money are mediated by institutions that obviously use power to benefit themselves. Centralized structures have an intrinsic flaw. It is centralized power. And where there is centralized power, there is the possibility of corruption and abuse. When governments around the world start to create initiatives to digitalize their currency even further, this means that one of their interests is to have more control over our transactions. Generally, we see governments removing the incentives for us to be using paper money and increasing the promotion of digital systems, digital money. Clearly, digital money from the central banks has some benefits because it's more practical, but the centralized government knows exactly how much, when, how, and where you spend that money. This is the opposite of what happens when you use paper banknotes. When you use paper money to buy something, it becomes very difficult to track that transaction. There are many countries, which I'm not going to be mentioning here which ones, in which it's very difficult to do something simple like an everyday thing using paper money, because nobody will accept it. If you know, you know. But technology's advancement is unavoidable. Money in the form of paper and metal coins will become less and less common. We can even say that newborn babies will not get to use paper money when they become adults. It will all be digital. You can search for the CBDCs, the central bank digital currencies, and you'll see there is a lot of work going on. Now, imagine the problems that would arise in a society that does not accept paper money. Hypothetically, imagine that you participate in some kind of a protest against the government. And because of that, they decide to block your wallet. You try to buy a plane ticket with your centralized digital currency, but it is registered over there in the database. You cannot purchase tickets to leave the country. This is not fiction. Currently, there are situations in which some people do not have the right to buy plane or even train tickets, depending on their behavior. If you think that this is a conspiracy theory, just take a look at the recent history. You can see in countries like Brazil, Bolivia, Venezuela, Argentina, and Cyprus, they have gone through events in which their government simply decided to block people's bank accounts and also limit the amount of money they could withdraw from the bank or from the ATMs. This is the problem with centralized money. When you use centralized money, you are at the mercy of the authorities. When a centralized government decides to devalue money by printing a lot more, purposely generating inflation, your purchasing power dilutes. When governments purposely create inflation, you are directly affected. With decentralized money, the authorities cannot interfere in your future, and you become your own bank. When it comes to decentralized currencies, such as Bitcoin, the only person who can interfere in your money is yourself. For example, if you want to withdraw a large sum of money or transfer funds to an international account, the bank, the traditional bank, is going to be asking you, what is your motivation? The recipient's details. They will also say that you have a limit. You can withdraw a certain limit per day. And you're gonna have also to pay very high exchange rates. This process can take a long time. In some countries, this means basically that you are unable to use your money how you want to. If you had the same amount in Bitcoin, you wouldn't have these problems. Just like you can send an email to anybody in the world with a few clicks. You can also send cryptocurrency anywhere in the world just with a few clicks. Nobody's going to be preventing you from using your money the way you like. And when it comes to decentralized money, you are your own bank. You remove the central authority, and then you can do what you want without having to justify yourself to anyone. You do not have to understand the technicalities of Bitcoin, how it works, in order to be able to use it. Now, one of the biggest obstacles that prevent so many people from using Bitcoin is that they say that they don't understand how the technology works. Now, the funny thing is that we are always using technologies that we do not understand. For example, do you know exactly how an airplane works? Probably not. And so, you go to the airport, you get on a plane, which fulfills the function of taking you somewhere else, even though you have absolutely no idea how so many tons of metal can take off from the ground. So trying to understand exactly all the details, how the technology of Bitcoin works, could be preventing you from entering into the world of cryptocurrency, the future of money. When you start to read forums which discuss the technical aspects of different cryptocurrencies, it can become extremely intimidating and even impossible for many people to understand. Even listening to some kind of presentation which was made for the general public can be difficult. Today, the rate of people who understand the technology behind decentralized currencies, it is very similar to the small quantity of people in the early years of the internet. Depending on your generation, you might remember how difficult it was to even connect to the internet and learn the difference between email and web pages. It is still very difficult to understand the different cryptocurrencies and tokens and swaps and staking and protocols which are still being developed. But the good news is that, more than ever, all of this is being simplified into extremely simple and friendly interfaces for any person to be able to understand how to use cryptocurrency with the same ease that they would send an email. The mass adoption of cryptocurrency has still not happened. It's precisely due to this that there is an enormous opportunity right now in front of you, especially to include those who don't even have access to banks in the world of traditional finance. Most of the population does not have access to banking services, and Bitcoin fixes this, removing obstacles. Did you know that most people in the world do not have access to a bank account, to a credit card, to other financial services? Banks are free to decide who they want to have as clients. If someone cannot prove their source of income, or if they have a lot of debt, or simply does not seem like a good client, it is difficult for them to gain access to banking services. Now, with decentralized currencies, this does not exist. Bitcoin does not discriminate against your credit history or the guarantees that you have to show. If you can buy, earn, or mine Bitcoin, you can use this as money however you like. Imagine what will happen when billions of people who right now do not have access to financial services. One day, they have the opportunity to buy things online, to send money quickly and easily to whomever they want, or even invest in stocks. A revolution is already happening to those who work abroad and need to send money to their families in their home countries. Until recently, these transfers were made through old-fashioned companies that took a long time to send the money and still charged very high fees with really bad exchange rates. Now, more than ever, people are using Bitcoin and other decentralized finances to send money this way. Instead of paying a very high exchange rate for sending money, the transaction is carried out instantly with a fixed fee, just for the computing power. This same advantage applies to those who buy and sell products or services online. With traditional currencies, the payment needs to be mediated by a third party. This third party charges a rate for the service and can impose a lot of bureaucracy. Now, with cryptocurrency, the relationship is between buyer and seller directly, reducing taxes, waiting time, and bureaucracies. Nothing is perfect. Bitcoin comes with risks, and you need to learn how to handle them. There are a lot of advantages to using Bitcoin, but it also comes with some risks. In the beginning, Bitcoin was very much associated with illegal activities such as money laundering, drug trafficking, weapon sales. But paper money is also used for all these things, and nobody is stopping people from using banknotes because of that. With both cryptocurrency and paper money, the legitimate use greatly outweighs the illegal usage. So you don't need to worry too much about this type of risk. Now, the second risk is a little more worrying. The risk that people in power will do everything to prevent the advance of cryptocurrencies. You only need to look at history to know that people in power always see innovation as the enemy. Every kind of technology, when it is invented, it is bad, it is hard to understand, it is heavy, it is expensive, it's just an inconvenience. That was what it was like with the first automobiles. The crowd used to laugh to these eccentric people who bought automobiles which were expensive, slow and noisy. Horses were a lot more efficient in that era. Today this comparison does not make sense anymore. The powers that be do not like disruptive technology that has the potential to change the way things work. In order to keep themselves in power, as soon as leaders start to notice that something is getting serious, they will start to attack this invention, trying to devalue the technology and instill fear in people's minds. All technology tends to improve. Financial institutions and banks used to laugh, brushing off Bitcoin as a scam or as a fad, which everyone should stay away from. And as the years have gone by, the narrative has slowly changed, and traditional financial institutions are now agreeing that Bitcoin is a new type of financial asset class, and that it should be part of people's investment portfolios. Instead of debating whether or not it is a good way to store value, now there is talk at a more advanced level about how environmentally friendly it is and how to use more and more renewable energy to power its network. Nowadays, there is still some controversy around this topic. Some banks, some companies actually recommend investing in Bitcoin, while others actually prohibit Bitcoin sales, and even they prohibit their clients from investing in companies who have Bitcoin in their treasuries. The Bitcoin system is safe. The biggest vulnerability is yourself. Working since 2008, Bitcoin has not suffered any successful cyber attack. Despite the fact that it is a highly targeted system, worth trillions of dollars, nobody has been able to affect the decentralized network, the Bitcoin network. But this does not mean that digital currency is completely free from attacks. Remember that in the world of cryptocurrency, you are your own bank. This means that you are responsible for guarding the access keys to your own Bitcoin. The biggest risk is not that the super hacker will come and invade the Bitcoin network, this decentralized system. No, they will not steal everybody's money. No way. The biggest risk is that you simply forget your password, or that you use a weak password, or you write them down on a piece of paper, or just keep your Bitcoin in an exchange. If you, for whatever reason, lose your password, you also lose all the Bitcoin that you have in your wallet. This loss is irreversible because the system is decentralized. There is no telephone number for you to be calling asking for help. In the same way that Bitcoin empowers people to use money the way they like, it also gives you total responsibility to keep it safe. This is the end of money. It is the end of traditional money as we know it. Independently of Bitcoin's success, as time passes, we hear more and more of digital currencies being developed also by central banks. But the word end just does not represent only the end of an era. End is a word also represented with finality. And the finality of money is to preserve your purchasing power, to allow efficient transactions, to empower individuals. Money in itself is not an end. Money should increase your level of freedom. This is why it is important for you to pursue this interest that you have, to learn about the transformations that are happening right now and what technologies will best serve this purpose. You just learned here what the main advantages and disadvantages are with the new era of money. A new era which you may be even doubtful about entering right now, but as time passes it will become a reality as common as sending an email, watching an online video, or sending a message on your phone. The earlier you learn, the better. I'm not saying for you to go all in hoping to get rich overnight. No, that's not the idea. But you have to know the technology before other people. You have to learn how to use it well, to set up your position so that in the future you will have great competitive advantage. We are still going to talk a lot about Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies in our Money Arata series. And now I invite you to visit the link arata.se/diamond hands for a special presentation to learn more.